All right. Hey, this is Erik Stottlemyer. I'm here at Adventure Park USA's Whistle Stop Smokehouse Saloon, our Bitcoin meetup group. Now, we're talking about all of the intricacies of Bitcoin here at Adventure Park USA and how it affects, for me personally, how it affects businesses and how it affects our futures and our future earnings. And so it's awesome to be able to meet up with the group that I've got here. For those of you guys that are watching online, you're missing out on an awesome opportunity to feel the energy of the room and to feel the energy coming off of the folks that are here and they're meeting up. A little bit about us at Adventure Park USA. We've been in business since 1979. My family started in the family entertainment business in 1979 in Frederick, about 15 minutes north of here, up on Thomas Johnson Drive. We moved to this location. We bought this property in 2003 when my father discovered that the land that he was on was just not enough. He wanted to do more. We had an acre and a half. And we moved over to this location. We bought this in 2003. We opened up in 2005 and have been moving forward from that point. So I took over in 2019. The interesting thing about this is we've been doing this since 1979. Like I shared with the group here before we started recording, wealth is something that escapes a lot of us in small business. And so how do we develop wealth? And how do we develop wealth, not just inside of our organization and our company, but how do we develop wealth that we can retire with? And how do we do this on an individual basis? And that's what, when I talk to 50, 60 other FECs, family entertainment centers, which is what we are, owners, leaders, and managers, we're all looking at the same thing. How do we put as much as we possibly can either away for our future, our retirements, things like that, or how do we compensate our team and help our team to grow? And so I've been talking to the group here about things that have to do with Bitcoin. How does Bitcoin going to influence our businesses? How are we going to be able to share the wealth with either our teams or with ourselves? How do we put this away, and how do we build something that we can use individually for our future, our retirement, or maybe our children or our grandchildren, things like that we can pass on to generations to come. So I decided to basically, I've met a gentleman by the name of Craig Shipp about, I don't know, probably 10 years ago. And Craig and I just recently linked up and started talking about Bitcoin about 6 months ago. The light bulb went off in my head as to I need to actually be aware of what's going on with Bitcoin. It wasn't until September that I started buying Bitcoin. Started looking at what was going on, seeing what Michael Saylor is doing, seeing what other individuals are doing, with their Bitcoin and how they're producing wealth, personal wealth, through buying Bitcoin. And it was complicated. So one of the things we're hoping to be able to do with these meetups is educate local folks as to how to get involved in buying and in buying Bitcoin and holding on to it, so that you can have a portfolio that is in your pocket that you can watch on a daily basis and see it grow, see it develop into something more, and be a part of an environment that is really exciting. It's one of the most exciting things, and I do a lot of exciting things here. I mean, I build roller coasters for a living, and I sell fun for a living, and this is a really fun and exciting thing. It's a lot to learn, it's a lot to digest, and for a lot of people it's very intimidating. So hopefully the group of people that are here, if you come out to our next event, you'll be able to learn a little bit more about Bitcoin and about how it's going to influence you and how you can actually get on the bus and get off of zero. So we've got Chris here. Chris is going to be talking to us today about some awesome, awesome opportunities with Bitcoin and what we've got going on with heaters.
So hopefully this is showing up pretty good on camera. I think it's the first time it's been photographed. Hopefully it's, not breaking lenses. So right now what you're looking at is a dressed up Bitcoin miner. This particular model I keep in my office space. I host a lot of trainings. I own and operate a call center. We do outbound calling and customer service, but in my training room and meeting room, this would sit and it would heat up the space about 2 degrees warmer than the rest of the facility. The reason I did this is because, this uses electricity just like a traditional space heater does. There's no difference in the electrons that it consumes. There's no difference in the heat output. I would argue that this one is better just because it disperses it a little bit better. I'm going to show you underneath the skin real quick that it is a little bit more complicated than a space heater. This is a full-blown computer. This thing weighs about 14 pounds. It does require internet in order to operate, but I can adjust this to a specific power setting. I consume about 40 to 45% less electricity than a typical space heater does. If you go to Target, if you go to Walmart, a traditional space heater, one you pay $20 to $120 for, is going to use on average between 1,100 and 1,500 watts of electricity. Mathematically, if you add that time up, or if you add that up, and you run it for about 12 hours, specifically where we live in the state of Maryland, it's going to cost you about $2.50 a day to run it for 12 hours. This particular space heater, I can run for 24 hours, and it costs me about $2.80 a day to run. That's because I'm using 45% less electricity, but the difference is that this one pays me over $1 a day in Bitcoin. I come out net positive. I still have the same heat output that I desired to begin with, and I get to hold Bitcoin that ultimately I can do whatever I want with. That was an option that I did not have before this technology existed. I also happen to make candles. I started thinking about just heat in general, right? And just the different places that heat are used on a day-to-day basis. We all use heat more places than we would like to probably think about. One of the most important things in places that we use it is with water, right? I think most people have either a boiler or some form of hot water for hygienic reasons and health reasons. Your water heater will typically get to about 115 to 130 degrees at the tank. And then the output temperature at your faucets is typically measured somewhere around like 100 to 105. And even then, that's a little hot, right? Like you probably feeling the temperature. This Bitcoin miner or Bitcoin miners are just computers, right? So they're just computer chips with electricity going into it, which creates a heat output, right? Just like your regular desktop, just like your laptop, it gets warm on your lap, right? You hear the fan spin up and it starts exhausting out the side port. This does, it's just a bigger version of that. So you can get about 140 degree Fahrenheit heat out of this Bitcoin miner, okay? 140 degrees is more than enough to heat up your water tank. It doesn't matter if it's 10 gallons, 20 gallons, 50 gallons, or 5,000 gallons. The heat will heat up your water. You might need more heat, which means that you need more power, but regardless, it will do the job. The last thing I want to say about this is this is obviously a DIY, right? This is not a retail-ready product. It's made and designed to make you think about the concept, okay? When you dress it up, it masks everything, right? It takes away the cypherpunk or, cyberpunk, if you will, side of the technology, but it also adds a tangibility, right, to the concept of Bitcoin, where most people think it's just digital internet money, right? It's make-believe. It's not something that has a real physical application, but this is the infrastructure that runs the network, guys. Like, it doesn't exist without this. So there's a very physical and a very real side of Bitcoin that most people just do not get to see. I thank you all for your time. I'm here if you have any questions.
Chris, thank you. That's awesome. You're going to have to do some Q&A because that's an amazing product. I'm going to introduce now is my friend Craig Shipp, who got me involved in this originally. I'd say he and I met, like I said, 10 years ago. So Craig's going to come up and he's going to give a talk about his experience and what he knows about Bitcoin. So, Craig?
Fantastic. Great venue. The beef was fantastic. There you go. Can't beat it. I'm not professional like you guys, so I got a little cheat sheet here. So the first thing I want to say is it's still very early as far as Bitcoin goes. If anybody that's watching this and thinks, oh, it's too late for me, Bitcoin was pennies, 13 years ago, and now it's $40,000, whatever the price is as you're watching this. Doesn't mean a thing. It's still very early. We debated how many people are in Bitcoin. I think it might be 1%. Some people here were saying it's less than 1%. It's a very small number of people that actually understand Bitcoin and are involved in Bitcoin. So it's still very early. You can get involved in this. When I was young, I watched a TV show called Mannix, and I think it was like 1968. And I saw the detective in that series driving around. I think it was a Barracuda convertible, and he had a car phone. When I saw that, I said, well, you know, those are really cool. Phones are really cool, especially one in your car. In the mid-'70s, about 1974, a friend of mine was working in Australia, and he was testing a new system for phones. And then about 1980, there was a test system built around the Baltimore-Washington area that had 3 cells around Baltimore, 1 cell in Columbia, and 3 cells around Washington, D.C. And it was called a cellular phone network. And there was a test done. There were 150 phones that were very similar to this phone. This is actually a commercial phone that came out in 1983. This is the 8000X Motorola. But the phone that was in the test was just like this pretty much, but it didn't have the battery that came off the back. There were 150 of them, and the test went on for about a year and a half, and I had one of those 150 phones, and I wandered around with the phone, and I thought I was all that. You know, I was a young guy at the time. It could get me backstage in concerts. I mean, I could go all kinds of places. They thought I was FBI or something. I don't know what they thought. But if you think about it, and it was late 1980 that this thing started, they didn't even have cordless phones in the houses, okay? Didn't even have them in the houses, all right? So we have the same situation right now with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is going to be just as important as the cellular phone is right now to people. Okay, mark my words. It's probably going to take the same amount of time. Remember, we're talking 1980. The cell phone didn't really get into its own until the iPhone came out in, 2007, something like that. So, 20, 30 years, that's what we're talking about, right? That's how long it took. And so we're 15, 14 years into this right now. I say another 10 years. We were debating this earlier. Some people were saying it might be 20 years. You pick the date, but there's going to be a time when Bitcoin is just as common as the cell phone is right now. You're going to be using it just as often as you use your cell phone. It's going to be more important, in my opinion, than the internet itself, because if you think about it, money is 1/2 of every transaction. Money is very important, okay? For many years, there were coins, okay? There were gold coins, all right? That was hard money. That was the real deal. If you did a transaction and you want to buy a men's suit, right, you bought it for an ounce of gold 100 years ago, right? An ounce of gold will pretty much buy you a nice man's suit right now today. It hasn't lost any purchasing power, okay? That's hard money. They also used silver sometimes, right? Okay, silver. Similar, right? Platinum, you name it, right? But the problem with these things is I can't transport this to Dubai in 1 second. Okay, I can't do it. I also can't cut this into 1,000 pieces. Okay? It's got problems. Gold has problems. Also, gold can be confiscated fairly easily. All right? You hide it in your backyard or whatever, they're going to come with a metal detector. Okay? Bitcoin is the first asset in human history that you can actually have as a bearer asset. And if you do it right, it's extremely difficult for somebody to get that from you. Okay? Extremely difficult. And it's not worthwhile, in most cases, for like a government entity, for example, to try to go around and take everybody's Bitcoin. It's a lot easier for them to go into your bank account and take your money out of your bank account. All right? Moving forward, it's going to be very difficult for entities that you don't want to get your Bitcoin, whether that be a government, whether that be a family member, whether that be your ex-wife. Okay, so that's another thing that I saw in some of these detective movies and things that I watched when I was young, right? They all had Swiss bank accounts, all the heavy hitters, right? They all had a Swiss bank account, right? It's pretty difficult for us to get a Swiss bank account. And nowadays the government can go and knock on their door too and still get the information, right? But with Bitcoin, with 12 words or 24 words, you can have better than a Swiss bank account. This is going to be huge. Let me see if I missed anything here. Oh, by the way, speaking of like being early adopters, one of the reasons why I had some money to buy some Bitcoin years ago and still buy some Bitcoin is I was also an early adopter on domain names. I registered things like Frederick.com, I had racingcar.com, I had series.com. I had a bunch of domain names, some of which I sold over the years to live, right? But some of which I kept and developed into businesses. So that was another situation where I saw the internet come into its own around 1994 or so. And in 1996, I started registering a bunch of domain names and built some businesses. So the same thing. You've got to look forward. You've got to see something that is really interesting, that is going to make a huge difference. The first thing in my life was a cell phone. That's the first thing I saw that I said, man, this is going to change a lot of things, is the cell phone, right, if you think about it. And then I saw the internet come around, and I built a website, and I went down to visit my parents down in North Carolina. None of them had internet access at the time, right? And so we had to go to the public library to look at the website that I built, right? But when I brought up that website, this was around 1995, in that library, and it was what I had just published up in Maryland, right? I said, this internet thing, this might become interesting, right? So I think that's what we need to do. We need to look at something like Bitcoin and say, okay, what's the likelihood that it's going to succeed? What are the things that could possibly stop it? Okay? And we've got to evaluate these things. And if we think it's going to succeed, like I thought the cell phone was going to succeed, then you got to get involved in it early. And it just like the internet. I thought the internet was going to succeed, so I got involved in it. Okay? I'm getting involved in Bitcoin now. I'm putting a lot of my time and effort and energy into Bitcoin because I think that it has a future. It might turn out that I'm wrong, but I don't think so. But I think that you need to do your own research. You need to look into it. And then people say, well, hey, there's 10,000 altcoins out there. There's all these other, quote, projects, and people claim they're faster than Bitcoin. They're this, they're that. They've all failed against Bitcoin. They stand no chance. Bitcoin is a one-off thing. It's a thing that was discovered, invented, use whatever term you want. It is unique, and it has the first mover advantage. It has the network effect. All the big players, all the king's horses and all the king's men are coming into Bitcoin. They're not coming into your S coin, okay, your garbage coin. So Bitcoin is where you want to really focus, in my opinion. And I think it's the winner, and I think that those that get involved now will be thanking themselves 5 or 10 years from now. So I think that's all I have to say. Buy and hold Bitcoin, right? Hold it in self-custody if you can. I'll check back with you 5 or 10 years from now. We'll see how that whole thing's going. Eric?
Well done. Well done, Craig. Yeah, thanks, Craig. You can leave the gold coin and the silver coin up here. Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, the platinum. Platinum sounds good. I was going to say, so I got into cell phones in 1997. I went to work for a company called Bell Atlantic Mobile, and we had a unit, right, that was a little bit older than this guy, a little bit newer, than this guy, that was so awesome. Except for you had to put it over your shoulder, and so it was the first MERS, right? It was the universal purse, and you had your phone inside of it. So, but yeah, that's an awesome antique. The great thing about these too is we used to sell them as self-defense tools. So yeah, but anyhow, so. Want to give a chance for Chris to come back up, talk about. We've got some questions for you, so come on up. I actually have some questions for you, so chance to come on up here and yeah. So there you go. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, that sounds perfect. I like that up here. It's a good prop. Yeah, this is a good prop because
a lot of people have this, but they don't have the leather case.
I know, this is awesome, man. Like the cell phone, I think that your idea might pay off. Now, is this something that you actually helped concept and create, or is this something that is a creation from another person, another individual?
Ironically, it came from Hal Finney. If you don't know who Hal Finney is, he's passed away now. He had ALS, but he was the first person that Bitcoin, or that Satoshi Nakamoto talked to about Bitcoin, and was the first person to do a transaction with Satoshi Nakamoto on the Bitcoin blockchain. So Hal Finney put on BitcoinTalk.org. You know, if somebody was, man, I don't want to misphrase this, but basically, if somebody was, you know, smart enough, right, or actually needed the heat from this computer, you know, that it would be that would also be a benefit. It kind of got taken forward, and people I started following on Twitter, and mostly on Twitter, but some on Reddit, just because that's where a lot of the information was, began to implement immersion technology. So immersion technology is where you actually dunk the device in what is similar to a mineral oil, but it's non-conductive, so it doesn't carry electric current, so it doesn't fry your electronic device. They use it in transformers all the time.
PCBs.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like a PCB, except it's less toxic than a PCB oil. So Shell actually is making one. They just announced that at the Bitcoin conference in 2023 in Miami. So this immersion oil, you know, is kind of like the coolant in your car, right? It's just a way to move heat, right, and transport heat, you know, from out of the motor, and it goes into your radiator. The fan takes the heat off of the liquid, so the cool liquid goes back into your motor and keeps it cool. So it's all the same concept, where you're just using this oil to transport the heat, and then wherever you want to take the heat off is where you're applying it, right? So if you put this computer anywhere the heat is needed, you have a revenue source, right, from that electric current that's going into that device, as long as it's connected to the internet. And then you can transport the heat as a byproduct to whatever you need to apply it to. So right now this is being done for, I mean, we're talking hydroponic grows for food, we're talking fish farms, we're talking greenhouses in Canada. There's a place in Canada that's also using it as their heating process for their mash, for their gin. I mean,
Which gin is very important, I have to admit.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of people's diets too. It's crazy. I hear it does well for the skin. So
That's for the skin.
so the biggest and probably the most forward-looking and really what I think is the cleanest application is currently being done by a company called HeatCore in partnership with MicroBT. So they make the WhatsMiner, which is a Bitcoin miner. And they've got a server cabinet that effectively is just a bunch of Bitcoin miners, but it's a form factor that most people that work in data centers are used to. It just slides in and slides out, but they're cooled by the building's water supply. It's a 5-story tall commercial building. Okay, so they've got a 3-inch water inlet coming into the back of a server rack, cool water, running that through these miners, not directly but indirectly, and then they're putting that through a plated heat exchanger with zone control valves. So they're able to heat all of the domestic water, the entire 5-story tall commercial building, create Bitcoin and hold it on their balance sheet from the same electrical input costs that they had before.
That's incredible. So, and for a lot of people that don't understand, thermodynamics and what you can actually do with heat, you can actually create refrigeration with heat. So
that's a great topic, actually, and I just started looking into this. It's called absorptive refrigeration, and one of the greatest, I guess, comparisons or kind of the more widely adapted version of this would be in like an RV or a camper, right? So you have a refrigerator that runs on propane. Well, now if you don't use the propane as your heat source to create the to create the cooling cycle, you can use an electronic chip, right? So how would that be applied? Like propane is obviously a lot more portable than electricity is, but most RV parks have electric hookups now, right? So you have that. So you could theoretically get a little off grid if you throw some solar and some batteries in there. I know a guy in Delaware right now has actually got a bus, like an old yellow school bus. He's gutting it and he's putting solar panels on it. And he's actually going to take direct DC voltage instead of putting it to AC, and he's gonna mine Bitcoin and heat the bus with like 1 or 2 S9s, which is in that mining case.
yeah, it's exact. I happen to know a guy who lives in an RV like 5 days a week, and he's got a little bit of knowledge about these because his refrigerator just went out in his RV. So yeah, it's got heating coils that are in there, and actually electrical heating coils that are heating rods that actually are used to create the refrigeration in your unit when you're not running on propane. And so for a lot of people that are actually part-timers, or like my friend, or that they're not using propane all the time, because propane is an expensive heat source. And so this is an amazing product that a lot of people use. And if you look at homes, I mean, we have a 22,000 square foot building. Some of the guys that are here have buildings or offices that I guarantee you that are using could use that kind of heat source to be able to offset some of their costs. And what you were talking about was, you said $2.80 to run it for a day, but you were getting $1 and some change back in Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's about $1 a day in Bitcoin right now, which is, I think it comes out to like 1,800 sats or 2,200 sats a day. And that's with the S9, which is like 7 to 8 years old right now. Right, and the beauty of the S9 is that you can run it on 110 volts, so you can plug it in any electrical outlet in most residential applications, right? So it's easy for home mining. If you get kind of upgraded, you start running into needing like a dryer circuit, something with like a 20 or a 30 amp outlet, twist lock, just because it does consume a little bit more electricity.
Gotcha. So what you guys need to do, because I know this is interesting. This is interesting to me, and for all of us geeks that like these kind of things. But you need to come out, and I mean, this is a kind of information that I think is awesome to be able to be a part of and see the things that are going on, because we're literally taking things, like Craig was saying, from the 1980s to today, and then from today, where are we going in the next 5-10 years? So, Chris, appreciate you coming out here. Appreciate you being a part of this, and hopefully you'll come back to our next event.
Yeah, I'll be the first person on the roller coaster.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Craig. Thanks for having us, and I appreciate. Thanks to Adventure Park USA, the Whistle Stop Smokehouse. You guys got to come out. I got to put a plug in for the food, the beer. Guys, was the food all right? Yes. Yeah, all right. The food was good. Food was good. Was the beer good? Yeah. Yeah. The beer. So there we go. So we got some people that are fans of the food here. We're going to come back and do this again, and hopefully you guys will join us here at Adventure Park USA. So thanks, Craig.
Remember, you can wait on Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is not going to wait for you.